October 31st, 2002, Halloween night in Sao Paulo, Brazil. While the city was celebrating, something unthinkable happened behind closed doors. Suzanne von Richthofen, a young woman from a very affluent family, would become the face of one of Brazil's most chilling crimes. A crime so chilling, so brutal, it shattered the perfect image of family, privilege, and wealth. Born into a life that many would envy, Suzanne had it all: a luxurious home, supportive parents, and a very promising future. But behind the gates of that mansion, tensions were brewing. Tensions that would soon explode in an act of unimaginable betrayal. What would drive a daughter to orchestrate the murder of her own parents? Love? Greed? Or something more sinister than that? This is the story of Suzanne von Richthofen and the night that shook the nation. Welcome to another Beauty and Crime Sunday with me, in which I do my skincare while we talk about the different cases that I found this week. Today we are going to Brazil. This case is very chilling because you would never imagine that a family member, someone that lives inside with you, might be the one that does the biggest betrayal ever. But before we start with this story, first of all, I need to explain to you the Richthofen family. A name that carried a lot of weight, power, and a legacy rooted deep in history. Suzanne's father, Manfred von Richthofen, wasn't just any engineer. He came from the prestigious lineage of the legendary Dread Baron, the infamous German fighter from World War I. The Richthofens weren't just wealthy, they were icons of success and respectability. Manfred had built an extraordinary career for himself in Brazil. By June 2002, he had been appointed as the director of engineer for a major company responsible for managing Sao Paulo's critical metropolitan highways, some of the most important roadways in the country. He wasn't just a professional, he was a key figure behind the infrastructure that kept Brazil's biggest city moving. Powerful, influential, but also very private. Suzanne's mother, however, Maricia Silva, was no less impressive. A psychiatrist of international renown, Maricia had Lebanese and Portuguese ancestry and had built her own empire of prestige, giving lectures, teaching courses, and gaining respect in psychiatric circles worldwide. The Richthofen family seemed perfect from the outside. Successful careers, powerful lineage, a picture-perfect family. They had 2 children, a son and a daughter, and it was their daughter Suzanne who would soon destroy everything that they built. November 3rd, 2002. 2 children, 2 very bright futures. The Richthofen family had it all. Money, power, luxury beyond imagination. Oh my god. A spectacular home, vacation properties, private security, luxury cars, everything that anyone could dream of. For Suzanne and her little brother Andreas, life seemed like a promise of endless success. But to truly understand how everything unraveled, we have to go back a few years to one afternoon in August 1999. The entire Richthofen family decided to go to Parque Ibirapuera to spend a very quiet day. This was a park in Sao Paulo, a very famous park, known for exhibitions, street performers, and weekend affairs. While strolling through the park, they stumbled upon an 18-year-old boy named Daniel Cravinhos, a streets market given a casual aero modeling demonstration, flying small airplanes in the open fields. Andreas, who was only 12 at that point, was instantly fascinated. Aeromodeling, with its intricate designs and very daring stunts, captured his imagination completely. He begged his parents to let him sign up for Daniel's course. Seeing their son so excited about something, and knowing he was already a good student, Manfred and Mauricia agreed without any hesitation. Soon Andreas started spending his afternoons in Daniel's courses, which were less about structured learning and more about passion, adventure, and risk. Daniel wasn't just about planes. He loved extreme sports, motorcycles, bungee jumping, anything that actually gave him an adrenaline rush. Andreas looked up to him like he was a big brother, but he wasn't the only one spending time with Daniel. Because Andreas was so young, Suzanne was often asked to tag along to keep an eye on her little brother during these afternoon outings, just to keep an eye on him. And somewhere between those afternoons, in the park and the street corners, Suzanne von Richthofen, the golden daughter of this prestigious family, fell head over heels for Daniel. Daniel was everything her world wasn't. Rebellious, rough around the edges, daring. He came from a very humble, working-class family. A sharp contrast from Suzanne's world of wealth and refinement. And in that dangerous difference, Suzanne found excitement, freedom, and eventually tragedy. At first, Manfred and Mauricia noticed a certain spark between Suzanne and Daniel. A few glances, a few giggles, but they didn't really think much of it, not at first. By the time they realized how serious things might have become, it was already too late. Suzanne, just 16 years old, she experienced a lot of firsts with Daniel. He wasn't just her first love. He was also the first to introduce her to the dark world. Under Daniel's influence, Suzanne began experimenting with different substances, the kind of substances no teenagers should ever reach. It became their daily routine, passion, intoxication, and recklessness. Their relationship spiraled into a very toxic obsession. Daniel even printed Suzanne's photo into his pillow, a chilling symbol of how deeply and dangerously attached they have become. And don't get me wrong, I have done this before, but not with my boyfriends, with family members. Taking a cute picture and put it on a pillow so they could see me every time they went to sleep, but it was kind of like family relationship, so I can kind of understand. But I would say, I don't think putting a face on a pillow is that bad. I feel like a lot of people have done this, or maybe not in a cushion, but definitely on like the coffee cup or different pictures on the wall. I think that's pretty normal, so. But the problem with them was that they spent many hours together, often at a place called Disco Verde, a weird, creepy motel far from the Richthofen mansion. And who paid all those vices, you may ask? Suzanne. Of course. She had access to her parents' money, and she used it to fuel Daniel's lifestyle. Their love was so intense, or that's how it seemed, that Daniel gave Suzanne an engagement ring. But even that was a twisted illusion. Suzanne herself gave him the money so he could actually buy it. So since Daniel had zero money, she would give him money all the time. And that's how he bought that engagement ring. So does it count? I am not sure. You tell me. But things came to a head on May 12, 2002. The Richthofens were planning on a family lunch, but Suzanne refused to go. She didn't want to spend any more time with her parents. And she was 16, so I can kind of understand. She's in that teenage era. So kind of words were exchanged, but very ugly words. And for the first time, Manfred, a father that had always been very calm, slapped his daughter across the face. And enraged, Suzanne, of course, left the house. But hours later, she came back, apologizing, crying, telling her parents that they were right about Daniel all along. She even took off her engagement ring and promised she was ending their relationship. But could you have all guessed it? It was a lie. Behind those tearful apologies, Suzanne and Daniel were still in a relationship, and now more dangerous than ever. In July, the Richthofen left for vacation, leaving the mansion under the care of their household staff. With the help of her little brother Andreas, who was naive, manipulated, and eager to please Suzanne and Daniel, they all had the house for themselves for an entire month. What happened during that month, you may ask? They set into motion the horrible acts that would soon follow. Before we go deeper into what happened next, I feel like I need to give you a little bit of context about who Daniel Carabinius was, the boy who actually changed everything. Daniel came from a family who almost had no resources. They lived modestly, repairing motorcycles and old carts to survive. A world far from the luxury Suzanne had known. Daniel Carabinius grew up in a complicated family. But even though his family was complicated, he still had a big brother called Christian. Christian had even a more complicated life. Christian was a guy who kind of looked like he was born just to find trouble. He did have a proper education, sure, but life quickly pulled him off track. Jail time for crimes tied to illicit substances, failed rehab attempts, and even a stint for being a police informant. Basically a walking disaster. In the middle of all this chaos, Daniel started dating Suzanne, a rich girl, spoiled, used to getting what she wanted. She paid for everything, dinners, gifts, trips, but she always demanded more. Wanted to impress her, Daniel, along with his psychic, Andreas, planned a surprise. The idea was simple. Meet at a cyber cafe, one of those old school spots people used to go to have internet and just chat and play video games and stuff. So Andreas was supposed to be in that cyber cafe, so Daniel and Suzanne could have a romantic night together, right? But Andreas was in another world, let's say. Hours slipped by while he was glued at a video game, completely disconnected from society. When Daniel and Suzanne finally came to pick him up, it was already very late. It was 2 a.m. when they went and picked him up. That night, the three of them, Daniel, Suzanne, and Andreas, wandered the neighborhood, drinking, laughing, playing along, riding the high of a night. Close to 4 a.m., Suzanne decided it was a done night, and driving the car that her father gave to her, they headed toward home. They entered the parking lot, passing the security booth. The night guard obviously recognized them and just let them pass. But as soon as they got into the entrance, they realized something was very wrong. The door was completely open. Lights were on. Some covers were just open everywhere with stuff all fallen on the floor. Andrea started calling for the parents, but no one answered. So fear started creeping in. Suspecting someone might still be in the house, Suzanne grabbed, just in case, a kitchen knife for protection. But Andrea started calling the police, reporting a possible break-in in the house and the missing parents. Given the family's social status, Officer Alexander Paulino was quickly dispatched. The officer searched every single room and he couldn't really find anything. No open windows, no broken doors. Everything seemed normal until he went into the master bedroom. What he found was one of the most horrifying scenes that the town had ever seen. Manfred and Maria were lying in their bed, their faces so brutally beaten, so drenched in blood. They were almost unrecognizable. The first blow was delivered with such a force that it almost ended everything instantly. Manfred didn't even realize what hit him, but Maria did. She screamed. She fought back. Defensive wounds covered her hands. Broken fingers where she tried desperately to shield herself, but it was no use. What happened to this couple was beyond brutal. At first, investigators might have thought that it was a robbery gone wrong, but there was something very chilling about it. Something that did not fit. The entire community rallied around the two orphaned siblings. It was heartbreaking. Suzanne sobbing uncontrollably, clinging to her brother Andreas, who was still in complete shock. It felt like the whole town had wrapped them in a blanket of protection and grief. But even in the middle of that grief, something felt very wrong. Investigators picked up on something. There were no broken windows, as I said before, no forced locks, no signs of actually breaking. And Susan's cries seemed weird. They were loud, dramatic, almost too dramatic. And then there was Daniel. Incredibly, he knew exactly how much money was taken from the house, down to the last bill. Weird. Something no ordinary guest should have known. The deeper the police dug, the stranger it got. Manfred and Mauricia had made it very clear they really hated Daniel. They didn't approve of their relationship. And in fact, that very night, Suzanne and Daniel claimed that they hadn't even been home. They said they'd been at a motel. The Motel Colonial, located in Avenida de Ricardo. Not exactly a place for a romantic getaway. Cheap, discreet, and usually rented by the hour. And yet Suzanne and Daniel claimed they had booked the presidential suite. They even ordered a Coke and a sandwich. Daniel paid, and very conveniently, he kept the receipt so he could give it to the police officers. But for the police, this perfect alibi raised even more suspicion. November 3rd, just 3 days after the horrible murders, Suzanne threw herself a birthday party at the mansion, the very same place her parents were brutally murdered in 3 days after. Suzanne laughed, joked, and celebrated without a care in the world. It was very surreal. Meanwhile, police eyes were obviously everywhere. They were keeping an eye on her. Remember Daniel's older brother? The one with the long criminal record? He was 26 years old, and on November 2nd, just 1 day before Suzanne's massive party, he did something that raised serious red flags. He bought himself a brand new, high-powered motorcycle. He paid for it entirely in 100 bills. That immediately caught, obviously, the police attention. They had been quietly watching him for days. And it didn't really take long. As soon as they brought him for questioning, he cracked. He wanted to save himself, and he was very ready to talk. What he had told them turned the whole case upside down. It was Suzanne. It was always Suzanne. According to the brothers, Suzanne had been the mastermind behind it all. She told Daniel and his brother that her family was incredibly wealthy, that she was sent to inherit millions, and that the only thing that was standing between her and her perfect future was her parents. This wasn't a spur of a moment of a crime. It was cold, planned, ruthless. Weeks before the attack, the trio managed to buy a gun off the black market. They even went to a remote area to practice shooting, only to realize that the gun would be too loud and it would attract too much attention. So they made a chilling decision. They would use iron rods instead. On the night of the murders, Suzanne and Daniel made sure everything was staged perfectly. They checked into the Motel Colonial to create a fake alibi, booking the presidential suite, ordering food, keeping the receipt obviously, in the trunks of Suzanne's Volkswagen, hidden from view, were the iron rods waiting. Suzanne had even prepared the scene at home. Latex gloves, shoe covers, an apron, everything needed to leave no trace. And after everything was done, after all that horror, Suzanne simply slipped back into her house, smiling, pretended to be broken, a grieving daughter. The final pieces of the plan were as cold and calculated. Suzanne gave her parents a goodnight kiss, one for each of them, and told them she was gonna stay up and watch some TV. Instead, she shut down the security cameras. She hid the gloves, the latex covers, the weapons, everything, right at the bottom of the staircase. Then she quietly unlocked the front door, making it easy for Daniel and Christian to slip inside. Suzanne literally covered her ears, hiding in the dining room, pretending none of it was happening. Later, Suzanne would confess that she just wanted everything to be over as quickly as possible. Daniel felt with rage toward Manfred for forbidding their relationship, attacked him first. Christian was responsible for Mauricia. All three, Suzanne, Daniel, and Christian, were arrested very shortly after. Andreas, the younger brother who knew nothing about it, who had trusted Suzanne, was completely devastated, learning that his own sister had orchestrated the murder of their parents, making him completely shattered. He swore he would never talk to his sister ever again. But the story did not end there, because when Suzanne was arrested, the real circus began. Suzanne lawyers Nibaldo Barney launched an aggressive campaign to clean up her image. He convinced Andreas, still broken, still reeling, to visit Suzanne in jail in November 14, 2002. And there, under pressure, Andreas was persuaded to write a letter forgiving Suzanne. The lawyer leaked the letter to the press, crafting a portrait that Suzanne needed to kill her parents, that she was a tragic, misunderstood girl who had simply made a terrible mistake. But Andreas soon realized that the entire thing was an orchestrated plan, a lie. He cut ties with her sister for good and fought to block her from inheriting anything of the family fortune, because at the time the Brazilian law didn't really have any laws to prevent a murderer from killing, for example, her family member and inheriting that money, even if the murderer was their own child. Because of this case, that would later change. But shockingly, before her trial, Suzanne was released from prison. Don't really know why, while she was awaiting sentencing. But it didn't really take long until cameras actually found her, trying to sneak into her uncle's house, where Andreas had been staying. She was desperate, begging Andreas to let her have some of that inheritance. Meanwhile, Suzanne's lawyer was orchestrating interviews with TV networks, fighting to maintain her clean image. During one of those interviews, cameras kept rolling while Suzanne was getting her makeup done. They caught a very chilling moment. Her lawyer leaning in and whispering, cry. The footage leaked, obviously, and just like that, the public saw the real her. Suzanne was no victim. She was a cold, manipulative killer. Finally, on June 17, 2006, the full trial against Daniel, Suzanne, and Christian began. Throughout the proceedings, Danielle and Christian didn't deny their part in the crime, but both made one thing very clear. The mastermind behind it all? The true architect of the plan was Suzanne. On July 21st, 2006, the jury left to deliver it. It didn't really take long. Within just few hours, they returned with a verdict. Guilty. All three of them. Judge Alberto Anderson Emiliano pronounced the sentence in the early hours of Saturday, July 22nd. They will likely spend many years in prison, he said. But in Brazil, good behavior can significantly shorten a sentence. Life moved on. Suzanne ended up working in a small agency inside the prison, Ruiz Gomez Agency. In an interview, Suzanne claimed she had fallen in love with someone, something she said she would never thought possible. She even married another inmate, Regina Ruiz Gomez, a girl. She really said that she would never thought possible to love a girl. I don't really know what that statement means, but okay. But the marriage didn't last. I don't know if you're surprised because I'm not. The authorities eventually separated them after violent fights and drama inside the prison. In another televised interview, Suzanne says she had found faith behind bars, that she planned to become an evangelical pastor, dedicating her life to prison. I don't know why when people like this commit great brutal crimes, they're like, oh, what should I do? I'm gonna focus on my faith. So from the blonde demon, that's how they called her, to a self-proclaimed woman of God. It was a transformation that very few believed. And now, after all these years, the main question still remains. Was Suzanne just a naive girl or a cold-blooded killer? Here's what I think, okay? Yes, Suzanne was just 16 when she met Daniel. But by the time the murders happened, she was actually 19. So, she was a big girl. No child no more. She had grown up with enormous power and enormous entitlement. In the end, it seemed like just a spoiled, reckless girl threw a tantrum, a deadly tantrum in this case. And the people who paid the price were the ones who loved her the most. What do you think? Was Suzanne a victim of her own upbringing or something far darker? In the end, the story about Suzanne isn't just about greed, betrayal, and tragedy. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from outside the house, it comes from inside. Families built on trust can crumble in a heartbeat. And in Suzanne's case, that betrayal cost everything. Justice was served, but the scars will remain forever. Not every fairy tale ends happily ever after. So, that was the end of the story. Tell me what you think about this case, because from all the story, the thing that I feel the saddest about is the brother. The brother, we don't know what happened to him, but I really feel bad for him. Imagine just losing your parents and your sister the same fucking day. I just feel very sad for him. So, tell me what you think. And remember, do your skincare. And if you don't end up like a glazed donut at the end of it, you're not doing it right. Bye-bye!